The HR office smelled like burnt coffee and broken promises. I sat across from Patricia, our head of human resources, while Mark Donovan, my boss, leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. He wouldn't look at me directly. "Erin, we've made a difficult decision," Patricia began, her voice practiced and hollow. "We've decided to let you go. It's time to move on." The words hit like cold water. 3 weeks ago, I'd saved the client demo by fixing code until 4 a.m. 2 days ago, Mark had called me indispensable in front of the executive team. Now this. My laptop screen went black mid-sentence. Someone had already disabled my access. The security guard appeared in the doorway, waiting to escort me out like I'd committed a crime. I looked at Mark. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Anger, disbelief, and humiliation collided in my chest. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to make them explain how they could do this after everything I'd given. Instead, I stood up slowly, gathering my phone and bag. "I understand," I said quietly, "but my name is Erin Walters," and they had absolutely no idea what they'd just done. 6 months earlier, everything had been different. I was the reliable coordinator everyone depended on. When the sales team needed technical explanations for client calls, they came to me. When developers hit roadblocks, I smoothed things over. When interns needed mentoring, I stayed late to help them understand our systems. I worked triple duty without complaint. Debug code in the morning, manage client expectations in the afternoon, train new hires in the evening. My calendar looked like a game of Tetris with no empty spaces. Mark loved praising me publicly. "Couldn't do any of this without Erin," he'd announce in team meetings, gesturing toward me with theatrical appreciation. Everyone would nod and smile. But privately, my name disappeared from reports. The project documentation listed Mark as lead developer on code I'd written. The client presentations featured his name in bold letters, while mine appeared nowhere. I noticed but said nothing. I told myself it was just corporate politics. That recognition would come eventually. That hard work spoke for itself. I was working 80-hour weeks and earning credit for exactly 0 of them. But I didn't know that yet. The merger announcement came on a Tuesday morning. Our CEO, Brian Foster, gathered everyone in the main conference room. He smiled too wide as he explained that Quantum Solutions was merging with TechCore Industries, a massive firm 3 times our size. "This represents incredible new opportunities for growth," he said, using words that sounded positive but felt ominous. Everyone knew what mergers really meant. Layoffs, restructuring, people losing jobs while executives got bonuses for streamlining operations. After the meeting, Mark pulled me aside. "Erin, I need you to lead the integration planning. You know our systems better than anyone." I should have seen the trap then. Integration planning meant documenting everything. Every process, every system, every piece of institutional knowledge. It meant making myself replaceable. "Of course," I replied. "Happy to help." "Great. I'll need preliminary reports by next Friday." That was 9 days of work compressed into 5. No discussion of overtime pay. No acknowledgement that I already worked 50-hour weeks. Just another impossible deadline with my name attached to the failure if it didn't get done. I started working weekends immediately. 3 weeks into the integration planning, I noticed something strange. The project files I'd uploaded to our shared drive had been modified. Not the content, the metadata. The author field that should have displayed my name now showed marks. I opened the revision history. Every major document I'd created had been quietly relabeled. My status reports became his status reports. My technical specifications became his technical specifications. I scheduled a meeting immediately. Mark barely looked up from his phone when I entered his office. "The shared drive files have been changed," I said, pulling up examples on my tablet. "My name's been removed from everything." He glanced at the screen and shrugged. "Oh, that? It's just presentation formatting. The executives want consistency in how things look. But these are my documents. I wrote them." Mark's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Relax, Erin. You're being paranoid. We're a team. Does it really matter whose name is on the folder?" Everything inside me screamed that yes, it absolutely mattered. But I swallowed the protest. "I suppose not," I said. That was my first mistake. The client demo deadline arrived like a freight train. We'd promised TechCore's biggest account, a financial services company worth millions annually, a live demonstration of our new integration platform. The demo was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Friday. Thursday night at 11 p.m., the entire system crashed during final testing. I got the panicked call from our lead developer, who'd already given up trying to fix it. The authentication module is corrupting user sessions. I can't figure out why. We're screwed. The rest of the team had gone home hours ago. Mark wasn't answering his phone. I drove back to the office, arriving just after midnight. The building was silent except for the hum of servers and my keyboard. I traced the bug through 17 layers of dependencies, finally finding the problem buried in legacy code nobody had touched in months. By 4 a.m., I had it fixed. By 6 a.m., I'd tested every possible scenario. By 8 a.m., I'd written documentation so the demo team would know exactly what to do. The demo went perfectly. The client loved it. The next morning, Mark presented our success to the executive team, with himself front and center, accepting congratulations while I sat in the back taking notes. I finally went to HR 2 weeks after Mark took credit for the demo fix. Patricia welcomed me into her office with a practiced smile. "What can I help you with, Aaron?" I explained everything calmly. The relabeled files, the credit theft, the all-nighter I'd pulled while Mark was unreachable. I had timestamps, revision histories, email threads. Patricia listened with her head tilted sympathetically, occasionally nodding. When I finished, she sighed. "I understand this is frustrating. These situations can be complicated in collaborative environments." "It's not complicated," I said. "He's taking credit for my work." "I'll definitely look into it," Patricia promised. "These things take time to investigate properly. In the meantime, try to focus on being a team player. Sometimes perception matters as much as reality. Translation: shut up and accept it." I walked out knowing nothing would change, but something shifted inside me. I stopped trusting that the system would protect me. That afternoon, I started documenting everything. Every email got saved to my personal drive. Every conversation got summarized with timestamps. Every file I created got backed up with clear authorship markers. If they wanted evidence, I'd give them evidence. While reviewing paperwork for vendor contract renewals, I discovered something interesting. My employment status wasn't standard full-time. It was listed as contract to hire with retained intellectual property rights for software contributions created using personal resources or outside standard work hours. I read that clause 3 times, pulse quickening. It meant anything I developed on my own time, using my own equipment, belonged to me. Not the company. Me. I pulled my original signed agreement from my home files. There it was, page 7, paragraph 3. Clear as day. I'd negotiated that clause when I started, back when I'd been doing freelance development on weekends. I'd forgotten about it entirely, but now it felt like discovering a weapon I didn't know I owned. That night, I went through my project contributions carefully. 40% of the current integration platform had been developed during unpaid overtime on my personal laptop. The core authentication system I'd fixed during that all-nighter, built entirely outside office hours. Legally, ethically, contractually, that code was mine. I made copies of everything, organizing it meticulously with timestamps and development logs. Then I waited. The gaslighting started subtly, then intensified. Mark stopped inviting me to planning meetings. When I asked about it, he'd say, "Oh, didn't I tell you?" Must have slipped my mind. Colleagues began avoiding me in the hallways. The friendly conversations at the coffee machine dried up. Nobody made eye contact anymore. One afternoon, I overheard 2 developers talking in the break room. They went silent when I entered. "What's going on?" I asked directly. They exchanged uncomfortable glances. Finally, the younger one spoke. "Mark's been giving feedback in team meetings. He said you've been difficult to work with lately, resistant to collaboration." My stomach dropped. "That's not true." "We know," he said quietly, "but people are nervous about the merger. Nobody wants to be associated with anyone management sees as a problem." I was being systematically isolated, turned into the office problem child without ever being given a chance to defend myself. But I didn't fight back publicly. I didn't argue or defend myself in meetings. I just kept working, kept documenting, kept preparing. My mental strain built like pressure in a sealed container. But outwardly, I remained calm and professional. Every receipt saved. Every email backed up. Every like cataloged. The merger kickoff event arrived with uncomfortable fanfare. TechCore's executive team descended on our office like visiting royalty. Everyone wore their best corporate smiles and practiced their elevator pitches. The main presentation happened in our largest conference room, standing room only. Mark stood at the front, clicker in hand, walking through the integration platform's capabilities. My integration platform. My code. My sleepless nights. This proprietary system represents the cutting edge of secure data management, Mark announced, gesturing at screens displaying architecture I designed. It's taken months of dedicated development to reach this point. The executives applauded. TechCore's CEO asked technical questions. Mark answered smoothly, having memorized the documentation I'd written. I stood in the back corner, taking notes like an assistant, watching my work get praised while my name went unmentioned. One of the TechCore developers caught my eye. He looked confused, like he recognized something. I smiled politely and looked away. After the presentation, Mark received handshakes and congratulations. The CEO called him exactly the kind of innovator we need moving forward. Nobody asked who actually built the system. Nobody questioned the narrative. I walked back to my desk and updated my documentation file. The truth came during lunch with Claudia, one of the few coworkers who still spoke to me. We met at a cafe 3 blocks from the office. She looked nervous, glancing around before speaking. "I shouldn't be telling you this," she began, stirring her soup without eating. "But you deserve to know." My chest tightened. Know what? HR finalized the post-merger roster last week. I saw the spreadsheet when Patricia left her screen unlocked. Claudia met my eyes. "You're not on it, Aaron. You're getting cut." The words landed, even though I'd suspected them for weeks. "When?" "They're waiting until after the integration documentation is complete. They need your knowledge transfer first." Everything clicked into place. The impossible deadlines. The isolation. The credit theft. They've been preparing to replace me while extracting every ounce of value first. How long do I have? A month. Maybe less. I thanked Claudia and finished my lunch calmly. Inside, betrayal crystallized into something harder. Something focused. They wanted to use me and discard me? Fine. But they'd learn what happened when you underestimated exactly what you were throwing away. The LinkedIn message arrived that evening. "Hi Aaron, I'm Tyler Chun from Apex Innovations. We saw your work at the Regional Tech Expo last spring. Your approach to secure authentication systems was impressive. Would you be open to a conversation about opportunities?" I stared at the message for several minutes. Apex Innovations was Quantum Solutions' primary competitor. They'd been trying to break into the financial services market for years. My finger hovered over the delete button. Loyalty still meant something to me, even if it wasn't reciprocated. But then I remembered Patricia's dismissive smile. Mark taking credit in front of executives. The merger roster without my name. I typed a careful response. "Thank you for reaching out. I'm not actively looking, but I'm always open to learning about interesting projects." Professional. Non-committal. But the door was open. Tyler replied within minutes. "Great. No pressure. Just wanted to introduce myself. Here's my direct number if you ever want to chat." I saved the contact information and closed my laptop. I wasn't ready to jump yet. There was still work to do here. But it felt good knowing I had options. I started cleaning up the project files, working late when the office was empty. Every document got properly labeled with version numbers and creation dates. Every code module got tagged with clear authorship metadata. The sections I developed on personal time got separated into distinct folders with development logs attached. To anyone watching, it looked like routine maintenance. Organizing things for the knowledge transfer. Being a responsible employee during a complicated transition. But I was really building a fortress around my intellectual property. Creating an undeniable paper trail showing exactly what I'd created when I created it, and under what circumstances. The contract clause gave me legal protection. This documentation would make that protection impossible to dispute. I worked methodically, precisely, leaving nothing to chance. Each file got backed up to my personal encrypted cloud storage. Each timestamp got verified against email records and calendar entries. By the time I finished, I had an airtight case proving ownership of 40% of the integration platform. The company thought they were getting everything when they let me go. They were about to learn otherwise. Mark made his mistake via email. He was sending project updates to the TechCore integration team when he accidentally included me on a thread I wasn't supposed to see. The subject line read, "Proprietary Software Design, Final Review." The email body praised his innovative approach to authentication architecture and mentioned his months of dedicated development work. My authentication architecture. My development work. I sat at my desk, staring at the screen. He wasn't just taking credit in meetings anymore. He was claiming ownership in writing, to external partners, creating a false record that could affect licensing and patents. I hit reply, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. Interesting, that's my signature code architecture documented here. Were you planning to credit the development team? I attached a PDF of the original design specs with my name and timestamp clearly visible. I watched the little red receipt indicator appear. Mark had opened it. 5 minutes passed. 10. 15. No response. I smiled grimly and forwarded the entire exchange to my personal email. Then I forwarded it to my encrypted backup. The silence was louder than any excuse he could have given. HR summoned me 3 days later for a clarification meeting. Patricia's smile was thinner this time. Mark sat beside her, expressionless. We wanted to discuss some concerns about team dynamics, Patricia began. There's been feedback that you've been somewhat resistant to collaborative approaches. Resistant how? I asked calmly. Well, questioning authorship of team projects, for instance. That email you sent Mark seemed unnecessarily confrontational. I kept my voice level. I was clarifying factual information about code development. Is accuracy now considered confrontational? Patricia's smile tightened. You need to understand that in collaborative environments, individual credit becomes less important than team success. Perhaps you could work on being more of a team player. Translation: stop asking questions and accept your erasure quietly. I see, I replied. Is there anything else? They exchanged glances. Just keep what we've discussed in mind moving forward. I walked out understanding exactly where I stood. They'd already decided I was expendable. This meeting was theater, building a paper trail to justify my termination. They thought I'd go quietly, that I'd be too intimidated to push back. They'd badly miscalculated. The client demanded a live demonstration 2 weeks later. TechCore's financial services account wanted to see the platform handling real-world data loads before finalizing the merger. The demo was scheduled for 3 p.m. on a Wednesday. 15 minutes before showtime, a critical bug appeared. User authentication was timing out randomly, making the system unusable. Mark's face went pale as the error messages multiplied. What's happening? He demanded, frantically clicking through screens he barely understood. The development team looked at each other helplessly. Nobody knew the authentication system like I did, because I'd built it, alone, during all those unpaid late nights. Aaron, Mark said, his voice strained. Can you fix this? Everyone turned to look at me. The executives, the TechCore team, the client representatives. I could have let it fail. Let Mark crash and burn in front of everyone. But that would have hurt innocent people, my actual colleagues, the company's future. So I stepped in. 20 minutes of intense debugging later, I found the problem and deployed a fix. The demo proceeded flawlessly. The client applauded. TechCore's CEO praised the robust system architecture. Mark stood up, grinning. This is exactly why we keep her around. The words stung more than he'd ever know. Tyler from Apex Innovations reached out again, this time with specifics. We're building a new financial services division. We need someone who understands secure authentication systems at an expert level. Based on your background, you'd be perfect. We talked for an hour. He outlined their vision, their growth trajectory, their commitment to recognizing individual contributions. Then he said something that changed everything. If you've developed proprietary systems on your own time that you legally own, we'd be interested in licensing them. Fair market rate, with your name on the patents. We believe in crediting innovators properly. My pulse quickened. That's an interesting approach. We've lost too many talented people to companies that don't value them. We're trying to do better. He sent a formal offer letter that evening. Senior systems architect position. 40% salary increase. Equity package. licensing agreement for any proprietary code I owned. I read it 3 times, then saved it to my encrypted drive. I wasn't ready to accept yet, but I set my timeline. I'd finish the integration documentation, transfer the knowledge they were entitled to, and exit on my terms. They could have the pieces they paid for. Everything else was coming with me. My workload increased even as my isolation deepened. Mark kept assigning additional tasks, each one more urgent than the last. Need the API documentation by Friday. Clients asking for security audit reports. Can you train the new developer on system architecture? I did it all. Professionally, thoroughly, with detailed documentation. Because I needed them to have everything they were entitled to. No more, no less. Meanwhile, HR scheduled another review. Just a routine check-in, Patricia claimed. I finalized my personal portfolio during this period. Every piece of code I developed on my own time got organized into a clean, well-documented package. Every timestamp got verified. Every contract clause got highlighted. My personal development logs showed exactly when and where each module had been created. My calendar proved the hours I'd worked outside the office. My equipment receipts proved which computer I'd used. It was bulletproof. When they tried to claim I'd stolen company property, and I knew they would, I'd have irrefutable proof of ownership. The trap was set. I just had to wait for them to spring it. Mark's request came via email on a Monday morning. Aaron, for compliance purposes, I need you to send me all source code for the authentication system. Complete repository access. Legal is requesting full documentation of our proprietary assets. There it was. The final play. He wanted me to hand over everything, establishing company ownership before they terminated me. Once I transfer that code, they could claim it was developed on company time using company resources. I read the email twice, then composed my response carefully. Of course, I'll send you the version currently deployed in production, along with documentation of all company-owned components. I sent him a clean repository, everything developed during office hours, using office equipment within the scope of my official employment. It was fully functional and exactly what they paid me to create. The newer build, the one I developed independently with significant improvements, stayed securely on my personal servers. The real asset was mine, and they had no idea it existed. Mark replied within minutes. Perfect. Thanks for your cooperation. He thought he'd won. The evaluation meeting happened without warning. I arrived at work Tuesday morning to find an urgent calendar invitation. Department review session, executives only. I wasn't invited, but through the glass walls of the main conference room, I could see Mark presenting to TechCore's leadership team. Slides appeared on the screen. I recognized them. They were based on my integration reports. But every reference to my name had been removed. Where it once said System Architecture by Aaron Walters, it now read System Architecture, Integration Team. Where my development timeline had been documented, Mark's leadership was now emphasized. I watched from my desk as he erased me from the narrative in real time. The executives nodded approvingly. Someone took notes. They were deciding the future of the company based on a complete fiction. One slide caught my attention. Key personnel post-merger. Mark's name appeared at the top. My name appeared nowhere. I turned back to my computer and opened the acceptance email I drafted to Tyler at Apex Innovations. They wanted to erase me? Fine. But they'd learn exactly how much they'd actually depended on what they were throwing away. I saved the draft. Soon. Very soon. Which brought me back to Patricia's office. The burnt coffee smell. Mark avoiding my eyes. The security guard in the doorway. We've decided to let you go. It's time to move on. I stood slowly, keeping my expression neutral. Inside, everything was already in motion. Plans they couldn't see. Consequences they hadn't considered. I understand, I said calmly. Patricia looked almost relieved. She'd expected tears or arguments. Instead, I picked up my bag and phone with perfect composure. Mark finally met my eyes. Something like guilt flickered across his face, but he said nothing. I walked to the door, then turned back. Don't worry, I said, my voice steady. I'll move on. The smile I gave them was small, controlled, terrifying in its confidence. As the security guard escorted me through the office, colleagues watched with sad eyes. Claudia mouthed, I'm sorry. I nodded once. I handed in my badge at the front desk, signed the exit paperwork, and walked into the parking lot. My personal laptop was in my car. My documentation was secure. My new contract was waiting. They thought they'd won by getting rid of the problem employee. They'd actually just activated a bomb with a very short fuse. 3 weeks later, I walked into Apex Innovations headquarters for my first official day. Tyler greeted me personally, introducing me to the development team. Erin's going to be leading our new financial services security division. She brings extensive experience and some proprietary systems that will give us a significant competitive edge. We spent the first week integrating my authentication platform, the improved version, the one I'd built on my own time, the one that was legally and completely mine. The licensing agreement was generous. Fair market rate plus royalties. My name on the patents. Credit in all documentation. It felt surreal to finally be recognized. The system launched publicly 2 weeks after I started. Industry publications praised its innovative approach. The architecture was familiar to anyone who'd seen Quantum Solutions demo, but better, faster, more secure. Within days, the financial services company that had been Quantum Solutions' biggest client reached out to Apex. They recognized the system. They wanted to know why it looked so similar to what they'd been shown. More importantly, they wanted to know who actually owned it. Tyler forwarded me their inquiry with a simple note. Your call on how to handle this. I smiled and started typing. The collapse happened faster than I'd expected. The financial services company canceled their contract with Quantum Solutions overnight. Their legal team cited ownership disputes regarding core technology as justification. Quantum's board immediately launched an investigation, demanding to know how their proprietary system had ended up with a competitor. That's when they discovered Mark's problem. He claimed credit for technology he didn't actually own. The employment contracts clearly stated that work done on personal time using personal resources belonged to the employee. The integration platform Mark had presented as company property, 40% of it was legally mine, and I had ironclad documentation proving it. The merger with TechCore stalled immediately. Nobody wanted to acquire a company whose flagship technology was built on disputed intellectual property. Panic spread through Quantum's offices. Patricia called an emergency meeting with legal. Mark was suspended pending investigation. My former colleagues started messaging me privately. What's happening? Is it true you all own the authentication system? Did Mark really steal your work? I responded simply, the documentation speaks for itself. Legal teams from 3 companies began reviewing contracts, emails, and development logs. Every piece of evidence I'd carefully preserved suddenly became crucial. Mark's narrative collapsed under scrutiny. The emails surfaced exactly as I'd known they would. Someone leaked internal communications to the executive team, conversations where Mark had systematically taken credit for my work. The metadata changes, the presentation edits, his explicit claims of ownership over code I'd written. Patricia's complicity became clear too. She'd known about the credit theft. Multiple employees had reported it. She dismissed every complaint and helped build the case for my termination instead. TechCore's CEO demanded answers. Brian Foster, Quantum CEO, had no good ones. Within a week, Mark was suspended indefinitely. His access was revoked, his computer seized for forensic analysis. The evidence was damning and irrefutable. Patricia resigned quietly, the resignation letter carefully worded to avoid admitting wrongdoing. But everyone knew. HR leadership had protected the wrong person and created massive liability for the company. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from former coworkers. Some apologized. Some asked for advice. Some wanted to know if Apex was hiring. I responded selectively, professionally, without vindictiveness. The truth had done all the work. I didn't need to pile on. The final meeting happened 6 weeks after my termination. Apex's legal team, Quantum's legal team, and TechCore's representatives gathered via video conference. I attended from Apex's main office, sitting beside Tyler and our CEO. The issue was simple. Who owned the authentication system, and what were the implications? I presented my documentation. Employment contract with the intellectual property clause. Development logs with timestamps. Equipment receipts. Calendar entries. Email records. Every piece of evidence organized chronologically and irrefutably. Quantum's lawyers tried to argue collaborative development and company resources. But the logs were clear. I'd worked on my personal laptop during my personal time on technology they hadn't paid me to create. Brian Foster looked older than I remembered. He knew what this meant for the merger. "Ms. Walters," he began carefully, "perhaps we can reach an accommodation. License the technology back to us at reasonable terms." Before I could respond, Mark's voice crackled through the speaker. Apparently, he'd been allowed to attend remotely. "Aaron, please. I made mistakes, but we can work this out. Just speak in my defense here." The room went silent. Everyone looked at me. I met the camera calmly. "You told me to move on. So I did." Nothing more needed to be said. The power dynamic had shifted completely. 4 months later, I walked through Apex Innovation's bright, modern office space, heading to meet my project team. We just landed 2 major contracts, including the financial services company that had left Quantum. Our authentication platform was becoming an industry standard. My name was on the patents. My team respected my leadership. My salary reflected my actual value. A news alert popped up on my phone. Quantum Solutions files for bankruptcy protection. Merger falls through. I read the article briefly. The company had collapsed under the weight of disputed technology claims and lost contracts. Brian Foster had resigned. The office was being liquidated. I closed the tab and continued to my meeting. I felt no pleasure in their destruction, only quiet satisfaction that the truth had prevailed. They tried to use me up and throw me away. They'd stolen credit, isolated me, and planned my termination while extracting every ounce of value. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd assumed I wouldn't protect myself, that I wouldn't document, that I wouldn't know my own worth. Tyler found me after the meeting. "There's talk of expanding your division. You'd be VP level, full executive authority." I smiled. "Let's discuss terms." As I walked back to my office, I thought about everything that had led here. The betrayal had been real. The pain had been real. But so was this, the office with my name on the door, the team that valued my contributions, the recognition I'd always deserved. They taught me the difference between loyalty and blindness. Moving on wasn't leaving. It was leveling up, and I'd never looked back.